And we have some breaking news out of college football where the Big Ten Conference has suspended Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh from the sidelines for the remainder of the regular season. He will be allowed to coach during the week after the conference found Michigan conducted an in-person scouting operation for years. The NCAA investigation is ongoing into the in-person sign stealing scandal that has engulfed the third-ranked Wolverines for almost a month now. According to our Dennis Dodd, Michigan touching down right now in Happy Valley, where they have a very big game. They're taking on Penn State tomorrow. So it's been a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces to get to this point. October 19th, the NCAA announces the investigation. You see the timeline there. Fast forward all the way to November 10th, where the Big Ten, that big news, has suspended Jim Harbaugh for the regular season. And let's welcome in Sam Webb, publisher of the Michigan Insider. Sam, we had talked about this throughout the week. We've been waiting to hear about this response. And something that we were just talking about off camera is how Michigan found out about this. So give us your reaction and then tell us about that as well.
I don't think that they're totally surprised. I think they're surprised by the way they found out. They read about it on social media, just like the rest of us. This was leaked to the media before it got to Michigan. But that kind of speaks to how this whole thing has devolved. I think the impression from Michigan's side of things is you have a commissioner who is clearly out of his depth, who has not had the time on task to have the perspective necessary to bring to heel the rest of the league, who is very upset by the allegations, to the point where I think some of the impact of these, even if the allegations are true, and some of them appear to be, the impact of those transgressions, I think, is being wildly embellished. And I think that was the point that was made to Tony Petitti when he came to town, because one of the arguments I heard he was making during his meetings with officials here in Ann Arbor was that, it's a player safety issue. And that was one of the things that was brought up by the athletic director for Michigan State during that athletic director's call that he had, and he was comparing it to the tunnel assault, where they had players swinging helmets and beating on Michigan players in the tunnel. As if you were worried about safety and intervention at that time, then you should be worried about it here, when the two scenarios are not the same. And this has never been a player safety issue. If stealing signs or decoding signs was a player safety issue, then certainly there would have been moves made to mitigate the practice, right? You would have speakers and helmets. You'd have more teams wristbanding. You would have more teams huddling, but they don't, because this is such a core part of the game. That doesn't mean that Michigan isn't guilty of any of these allegations, but I think the point that they're making is, let's have a thorough investigation. Even with the FBI investigation into basketball, the NCAA didn't intervene. They didn't go in front of the actual investigation. None of these leagues none of these league commissioners, went ahead of the NCAA or the FBI, for that matter, when it came to rendering a punishment in any of these investigations. That's an FBI case that had wiretaps, that had coaches on recordings actually talking about the offenses that they had committed, and no commissioner even stepped in those cases. So for the Big Ten to do this when the investigation isn't complete, when there's the impact of the transgressions needs to be really thoroughly analyzed. That's one of the reasons why Michigan put forth evidence that their signs were shared before the Big Ten championship game. That two teams, the allegations say, Rutgers and Ohio State, shared their signs with Purdue before the Big Ten championship game. So what would be more impactful if we're talking about the impact of stealing signs or having advanced scouting information? What advanced scouting is more valuable, more impactful? Is it from some random people sitting in the stands recording signs on the sideline, or coaches, actual coaches, giving you details of signs and how they match up with plays from two different coaching staffs? If it has an impact when random people do it, then certainly it would have a major impact when coaches do it. That's not saying that those coaches committed any violations, but we're talking about the impact of the transgressions. That's what Michigan is arguing. Need to have a thorough investigation, be completed first, need to really thoroughly and fairly assess the impact of those transgressions if they're proven to be true. Neither of those things are taking place here with this unprecedented action by the Big Ten.
And Sam, we just showed that timeline there. You saw it swiftly laid out. So I want to get your take. What kind of precedent does this set for other conferences in the future, whether it's within the Big Ten or without, that this can happen so quickly with, like you mentioned, with other NCAA violations or conference violations? It takes a lot longer typically. So what kind of precedent do you think this sets?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, to say the least. I mean, you know, as you point this arrow at Michigan as another institution or another coach or athletic director, the long-term implications of this are that it does not take an investigation to render a punishment. It only takes the complaints of the other league members to really spur the league to action. That's what really took place here. And the perfect example of that is Petiti making the player safety argument. That is, you know, even from an outside perspective, is an asinine argument to be made. And that was an argument that he parroted in these meetings with Michigan when he came to town, as if to say to them that, man, he is taken full bore their representation of how serious this is before he's even heard Michigan's side of it, and has taken a really, really, you know, not just biased view, but a, you know, off the wall view of the impact of this in a way that is really, really harmful. And the precedent that it sets, like I said before, you know, if you have enough schools, enough coaches in this instance that feel strong enough about the activity of another institution or another coach, then they can, you know, kind of compel the commissioner to take action. I don't know that you really want that to be the case, but it is the case now. You know, I think that's going to be one of the things that Michigan kind of argues as they look to get some injunctive relief here. It's like, look, the Big Ten is they're moving outside of their own policies and procedures here to do this. They're going outside of their own guardrails to do this. That is a reason for some intervention here. But the precedent, even if the court turns this over, the precedent has been set for how you can go get, or how you can take action against another member if there's enough other members that feel strong enough about it, like they do right here.
And Sam, we talked about this with Dennis Dodd and just the optics and what this looks like for Michigan in terms of the CFP. Michigan right now is at number 3. And do you think this is going to have an impact on the committee? And I know they're saying it's just football, but in terms of the CFP, how does this impact Michigan?
So I think it impacts Michigan insofar as if they lose a game. They have been, the committee, I mean, they've been steadfast in their position that, look, if Michigan is bowl eligible, then they will be considered in all college football playoff conversations that they're eligible to be in. So see no reason to think this has nothing to do with the eligibility of Michigan, only the presence on the sideline of Jim Harbaugh. That being said, if they lose a game and you start weighing one-loss teams, I find it very hard to believe that Michigan would get the benefit of the doubt as an at-large team. Certainly as a one-loss league champ, if they wound up in that scenario, well, you know, that's a circumstance where I could still see them getting in as a one-loss team. But I see no way that they could wind up in the same situation that Ohio State was in last year as a one-loss at-large team and get the benefit of the doubt. I think what's eroded here for them is the benefit, or the margin for error. They have no margin for error. And so it sort of begins right now, right? You know, it starts with the attorneys that were on call, that were ready for the possibility that the Big Ten would do exactly what it did, wait until they are less than 24 hours before the game, come down with the punishment, leak it to the media before it gets to Michigan, right, to kind of put them up against the clock and put them in a pressure cooker. But they've been making plans, making preparations for this moment. So I think they feel pretty confident that they can get some relief, they can get a TRO, and have Harbaugh be on the sideline. As far as how it impacts the team, I don't think it impacts their consideration for the college football playoff. It could affect them in the game if the coach that they've been preparing with all week all of a sudden isn't available on the sideline. I think they can still win it, but it's hard for that to not be a distraction for them if that winds up being the case in the moment. But I think the folks on Michigan's side of things are pretty confident that they have a good case, even up into the point of how this came out, how it was released. I mean, if you were going to suspend them for 3 games, it was pretty clear they were going to suspend them. They came to town, Petiti came to town talking about, according to my sources, an indefinite suspension, at which point Michigan was incredulous. Like, for this, the investigation isn't even done yet. So it seemed pretty clear that a punishment was going to come. It didn't seem like to anyone in these parts that the 3-game suspension was something that they just arrived at, here in the last couple hours. So that being the case, that this couldn't come down tomorrow, that it couldn't come down this morning, that it couldn't come down before they got on the plane. I think this is all information that the attorneys are going to use to help make their case for some relief here from the courts.
And Sam, as things stand right now, Harbaugh, he is not going to be on the sidelines for the rest of the regular season. So that leaves the question, who is going to step in for him if this stands how it is? When we saw the other situation in the beginning of the season when he wasn't there for those first 4 games, those aren't Big Ten games, but they kind of alternated with who was going to be there on the sidelines. Who is going to take over starting with Penn State if it stands how it is?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'll repeat. I think they feel confident. This will be a double-barrel response. It'll be Michigan with the law firm Williams and Connolly representing them. Again, they've been on call on the ready. I'm sure they know which judges and which clerks are on emergency duty here during the holiday. And then you'll have Harbaugh be a party to the lawsuit with his attorney as well. And so I think there is confidence, a lot of confidence, as a matter of fact, that they'll be able to get a restraining order and have Harbaugh be on the sideline for this game. But in the event that he isn't, to answer your question, I think it'll be Sharon Moore. I think they, as a staff, have some reps now with Harbaugh not being there over the first 3 games. They alternated coaches. You saw Mike Hart and Jay Harbaugh split duties 1 game. You saw Jesse Minter get another game, and then you saw Sharon Moore get the night game against Bowling Green. I think he's the guy. I think that he's the one that Harbaugh kind of looks at as the number 2 as far as staff hierarchy is concerned, and that he has a rep in that role, I think will help them slide into it if they find it necessary. And he also has a guy who's handled the play calling duties. I don't know how that would work, if he would completely hand over play calling duties or if he would split them with Kirk Campbell in game. That would be probably the biggest adjustment of them all, is who calls the offensive plays if Sharon Moore becomes the head coach. One thing to do that at home when you've been planning for it all week, right? And it's Bowling Green. It's another thing when it happens on the fly, and now all of a sudden it's Penn State and you're on the road. So I don't know what the answer to that is going to be, if Sharon would just go ahead and call the plays too and serve as the head coach. But I think he would have the head coaching duties.
He is publisher of the Michigan Insider, Sam Webb, a wealth of knowledge on this topic. Thank you so much, Sam. We appreciate it. Thank you for the updates. And of course, Michigan, as of right now, that big news coming out of college football, where the Big Ten has suspended Harbaugh from the sidelines for the remainder of the regular season, starting with Penn State on Saturday, followed by Maryland, and then number 1 Ohio State on November 25th. You see the note at the bottom there, the Big Ten championship Michigan is hoping to get to. That is on December 2nd. And for everything happening in the world of college sports, make sure you check out 24/7 Sports. Our team there has got you covered. Wall-to-wall team coverage, recruit rankings, transfer portal updates, everything that you need to know. Head to 247sports.com for all the latest.